Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has tested positive for coronavirus, and after months of promoting the virus treatment hydroxychloroquine, Bolsonaro is turning himself into a test case for the drug on Facebook Live.
What could go wrong? The president even took off his mask during a face-to-face interview with reporters to prove its efficacy. Friend of the show and The Intercept's co-founding editor Glenn Greenwald has been following Bolsonaro's diagnosis and all things Brazil, of course, and joins us now via Skype. Great to see you, Glenn.
Good to see you, Glenn.
Good to be with you guys.
All right, so just bring us up to speed, and then how has this news been, how have people been reacting to this news in Brazil?
Well, it's been assumed that Bolsonaro has had the coronavirus at least on 2 occasions, the most significant of which was when he came back from Mar-a-Lago, and almost everybody in his entourage tested positive for coronavirus. If you recall, his son, who's a congressman, Eduardo, told Fox News that he had tested positive for the coronavirus. And so Fox News reported that he was positive. This is back in, I think, April. And Bolsonaro then announced that, no, actually, he was negative. His son started accusing Fox News of lying. Bolsonaro refused to show his test exams that were negative. Media outlets had to sue to get them. And then finally, he presented some weird ones that seemed to show that he was negative. So, and he's been running around Brasilia looking for crowds. So he's constantly in crowds with no mask, doing exactly what you would do if either you already had the coronavirus and know that you're immune, or B, want to get it. That's what his behavior has been. So people assume like, oh, he must have already gotten it, lied about it, and is now immune. And yet on Saturday, he became quite sick. He had a moderately high fever, very severe body aches. His schedule for the day was canceled. And then it was announced on Saturday that he had gone to the hospital, gotten a test for the coronavirus. And then on Sunday, it was announced that he, in fact, has tested positive. So the assumption has been for a long time that he inevitably was going to get it because of his behavior. He doesn't wear masks. It was reported this week by Brazil's largest newspaper, Folha of São Paulo, that he's been telling people, aides and guests who arrive at his office wearing a mask. He mocks them and bullies them to take it off, saying it's a faggot thing, in his words. Wow. So it's just been a matter of time since, it was just a question of time before he got it, and now he has it. He's 65 years old. He's not in great health. Remember, he almost died 18 months ago when he was stabbed on the campaign trail. He had 3 different very complicated surgeries on his intestinal system, on his stomach, on the entire digestive tract. Jeez. So that's a pretty serious surgery to have. But, at the moment, in the first week, everyone who gets it is always reasonably healthy. You get some symptoms, they go away. It's the second week when, if it comes back threateningly, that's when it happens, and we're not there yet.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn, what has mystified me, I don't think there has been a worse world leader's response than Bolsonaro's to the coronavirus. Because I remember the Mar-a-Lago story that we broke down with you, and then constantly almost like ginning up crowds, almost encouraging crowds. What has animated this? It just seems bizarre and ridiculous the way he's handled himself.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, in the beginning, there was a lot of criticism of the reaction of Boris Johnson and Donald Trump as well, who seemed to minimize it because maybe it's the role of a world leader to kind of tamp down on the panic. Maybe they didn't take it seriously enough. But after a short period of time, Trump did change his tone. He held daily briefings on it. Boris Johnson, once he almost died from it, completely changed his posture. But Bolsonaro never has. He's, in fact, if anything, gotten more extreme in his denialism. To this very day, he mocks it as just a little flu. He does everything possible to impede the efforts of governors and mayors to keep things on lockdown, to prevent large crowds. And not only that, but he actually goes out and, like, as I said before, searches for crowds. So he's photographed constantly in crowds, obviously sending the message to people that this is what you ought to do. I think that Bolsonaro doesn't care about very many policy issues or substantive issues. It's one of the things people don't quite get about him. It's kind of like Trump in that way. He does have more fixed ideological beliefs than Trump, but only mildly more. He's really most invested in the culture wars and the idea of how you look at COVID-19, whether you react like a man and say, we're all going to die one day, we're not going to be cowards hiding in our home, hiding behind masks, or whether you're going to be, in his words, a faggot, wear a mask, be afraid of it, that's how he's looked at it, not as a scientific question or a public health question, but like as a psychosexual question, as a question about gender, which plays a huge role in the Bolsonaro movement. And that's a major reason why he likes to show how tough and strong he is. He said at the beginning that it would only, hurt you if you're over 65. But in his case, he doesn't need to worry because he's an athlete, as he calls himself, and therefore it would just be a little flu, even though he can't even do a push-up. So it's been very much this kind of bravado that has driven his response. And Brazil is a big country. It's 220 million people with tons of poor people living in great density with no health care. And so the country, Brazil, has done, it's in second place to the United States. It has about 100 million more people in terms of confirmed cases and deaths. But in terms of the epidemiological curve, it's probably the single worst country on the planet and getting worse.
Yeah, well, talk a little bit more about that. And by the way, he must be very relieved that the Trump campaign wants to protect the Christ the Redeemer statue. I'm sure you saw when they mistakenly sent out, send us your money so we can protect our statues, like the Christ the Redeemer statue. Anyway, what is the reality on the ground in terms of the pandemic spread, the testing? How are things actually going? Is the government really doing anything to try to curb this thing?
No, it's beyond words what can be described. I think we're all kind of inured to it. If you remember hearing all those horror stories of healthcare workers in Italy and Spain, that was 4 months ago now. That was in February when Italy and Spain were having their hospitals overflowed, when they were making life and death choices about which patients get respirators and which ones don't. It was horrifying. And now we're all kind of immune to it. But all of that is happening in Brazil and worse. It's interesting. Brazil is not a poor country. Brazil is actually a relatively wealthy country because of the resources it has. But the problem with Brazil is, and always has been, it has extreme radical wealth and income inequality. And the people who fall on the wrong side of that line, which is the majority of the population, have poverty that people in the United States barely would recognize, including a completely dysfunctional public health service that wasn't even functioning prior to the pandemic. The stories are common. If someone has a heart attack or a stroke, they go to the ER room of a public hospital and they wait 6 or 7 hours and die of a heart attack or stroke because they just can't be treated because there aren't enough resources or people. Imagine with COVID-19 spreading through favelas, spreading in densely populated cities, how much worse that is. There's no even sedatives to give to people when they're intubated. The respirator shortage is really severe. So all of the problems we've been hearing from the developed world, from Western Europe and the United States, are radically magnified in Brazil.
Well, what a crazy situation, Glenn. Thank you for keeping us updated. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn.
Good to talk to you guys. Bye-bye.
Next on Rising, Biden's Buy America economic proposal calls for tax dollars to be used to, quote, stand up to the Chinese government abuses. Former National Press Secretary to the Sanders campaign, Brianna Joy Gray, she's going to weigh in on Biden's plan when Rising returns.